Today is my birthday, and yet that doesn't stop me from wanting to talk more about Final Fantasy VII Remake. In particular, its heavily intriguing Classic Mode, which was announced at the Tokyo Game Show 2019. Final Fantasy VII Remake's action combat system has received tremendous praise from journalists, who've already managed to get their hands on the game's demo. Not that I'm jealous or anything. Despite overwhelming praise for this game's combat system, there are still a large number of purists who wouldn't be satisfied with anything other than the original game's active time battle system, or ATB for short. A system in which a character would perform a command whenever their ATB gauge was fully charged. Because of this, Final Fantasy VII is not actually turn-based, or at least not in the traditional sense of taking turns. If you try sitting your controller down during combat, enemies will indeed keep attacking. For this reason, instead of calling this turn-based as it often is, Square Enix has more accurately dubbed this style of gameplay a command RPG. And now with the introduction of Final Fantasy VII Remake's Classic Mode, oftentimes being called a turn-based mode, it aims to capture the heart of purist Final Fantasy fans. But can it do so? Especially since this game is clearly meant to be an action RPG, and overall, is Final Fantasy VII Remake's Classic Mode more important of a feature than we might think on a surface level? Classic Mode works by automating the action parts of the game. Movement, basic physical attacks and combos, dodging and blocking are all automated for you. In the meantime, your character's ATB meter is still charging, and once it's full, you're able to open the command menu, and from there have access to all your character's more powerful ATB commands. This removes the action game element entirely, putting you in control of the tactical elements. It's similar to the original in the sense that it's controlled as a command RPG, rather than as an action game. It also demonstrates that the criticism of the game somehow being reduced to a mindless hack and slash to be an utterly hollow claim, as you can still make an entire game purely out of choosing your strategical options. And for that reason, the benefits of Classic Mode are tremendous. For starters, those who had any apprehension to this being an action game can now subside their fears. There are also plenty of people who aren't necessarily good at action games able to access this game now. In a similar fashion, there's also tons of people with various disabilities that make playing action games insanely difficult for them. It's been over 2 decades since the original Final Fantasy VII. People who played the game back then may not be able to physically play the remake, as certain conditions can affect your hands, which wouldn't allow them to play with the dexterity required of an action game. But with that out of the way for them, the game now becomes a viable option for them to play again. In that sense, Final Fantasy VII Remake might be the most accessible AAA game of 2020, which is an absolutely tremendous accomplishment on Square Enix's part. That being said, Classic Mode as it stands now does have some concerns. First and foremost, my concern for Classic Mode being one that is also true of the game's normal action mode. Is the game going to be too easy as a result of automating all the action? With your characters attacking, blocking, and dodging perfectly, you're always minimizing the amount of HP being lost almost perfectly. During the Guard Scorpion fight used to demo Classic Mode, Cloud seemed to be dodging and blocking every single attack. This of course would make the game tremendously easier. This actually makes sense, as when the settings menu was pulled up, Classic Mode was listed first as its own difficulty above Easy Mode, which implies and leads to speculation that Classic Mode almost functions like a super easy mode. That also being said, Classic Mode being its own difficulty represents an opportunity to make it challenging in its own right. Granted, if the AI is too intelligent, it could also lead to this mode feeling more passive than it does tactical, which in itself is a huge issue. There's also the potential that you may want the AI to do one thing and then it does another. For example, suppose I decide to take on a fight in which I'm underleveled, or the enemy does a ton of powerful high damage attacks. I may want my character to play more defensively than offensively. At the current moment, there does not seem to be an option to suggest the AI to do this. So on one hand, I worry that the AI might be so smart that it can figure out the fight on its own and simply depends on you to trigger powerful commands. But on the other hand, I worry that the AI might be dumb and always attempt a straightforward strategy. If that ends up being the case, you may end up fighting against the AI more than fighting against the enemies. And just like playing this game in its action mode, there is still one major thing that this game is going to need that Square Enix dropped the ball on majorly with Final Fantasy 15 and until a patch rolled out, Kingdom Hearts 3 as well. The game desperately needs a hard mode. For seasoned players, the normal difficulty on these games is simply too easy, and the result is that the players have to self-impose challenges on themselves in order to make the game more difficult. In the case of Final Fantasy Fantasy 15, even people doing a level 1 run find the game not to be so challenging, simply because you can use infinite items at any given time. But I don't just believe that Final Fantasy VII Remake should get a hard mode, I also firmly believe it should get a classic hard mode. Allow players who want to play classic mode be able to challenge themselves even further, and to have their tactical prowess be pushed to the absolute limits. It's also going to serve to make the game much more engaging, especially for those who want the traditional experience, without the compromise of a game being too easy. In the end, classic mode appears to be a great additional mode for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's going to make the game much more accessible to a wide range of people, and possibly even please some turn-based purists. Though it has a few concerns and I'll be playing the game as an action game, I still definitely will be experimenting with it myself when the game launches on March 3rd. So Ultima Weapons, will you be playing Final Fantasy VII Remake as an action game? Or do you plan to give the so-called turn-based classic mode a go? Subscribe, click the bell icon, and let me know in the comments below. And if you've been enjoying my content, be sure to check out the Patreon for the Night Sky Prince. Awesome people like Jimmy are how I got this far. We are almost at 50,000 subscribers. When I started this thing, I never imagined it would have blown up this much. And thanks to the support of you guys, I know that we're going to be able to keep going. Shout out to Jimmy and the rest of the Ultima community.